Okay. Sorry, let me. Okay. So, I want to explain two things, and that will be something that I'll go into. Specifically, the follower modifier. That's what I want to go into before we start anything, because it's the most annoying. And then after I do that, I'll go on a very quick breakdown over how I did the main effect. And I'm gonna separate this video into like two parts. In any case, let me explain the follower modifier. So first, let's put this here and then add text. So now we have text. Well, one, the modifier is based off right-clicking, and then you get all these. You get time, text scramble, text timer, all this stuff. But here's the follower. You look there. Let's actually move this closer. So you get the follower modifier. You click there, and then this key shows up. Well, that doesn't matter, but that just means that there's a modifier to it. It's kind of running double function over here. You go to modifiers, and then you have options that displace the time. Let's go by like 3 to 4. Let's go. So now we have that. Well, we have the text. We have like the size, anchor, whether it's like left or right or whatever. You get all that. You have a transform that has options of rotation, shearing, and size, but nothing that means position. And this is where you get something interesting. Here we are in the shading tab. Now, you may have seen this from multiple tutorials and many other places, but if you know anything about the follower modifier, you've probably seen those tutorials out there before. And this is where things get interesting. One thing about the follower modifier is that you have to have something animated before anything shows up. And that's something that I want to make perfectly clear. You have to have an animation keyframe on the specific option that you want to have the following effect on. And this is where things get interesting. The main way to do the Serial Experiments Lain Title-card tracking or effect that makes the text be delayed by character is specifically doing an option in the position tab. And one thing that you're going to notice, if I keyframe offset, what does it do? What did it just do? Well, one, I can now rotate. I can change that position. Oh wow, awesome. And all this stuff, and move this around and do displace and all this stuff. But I can also change the center. So let's do that again. And then I can like change where it is and all this stuff. So I get ready and start animating because I want to animate it and all that stuff. But then we notice something. It's doing things that are weird. It's not animating by that, and it's doing some things that are kind of annoying and not what you want them to. But you go into displacement and it's not working the way that you think it would. And this is where you realize something is wrong. This is where you realize that the follower isn't connected to this path. And this is where the first problem kind of comes to. What you need to do and how to solve this is one specific thing, and it's adding a modifier to the modifier. That's the answer to it. So what you do is do the similar thing and say right click on offset and then modify with and then XY path. And now we see something very specific. Follower 1 offset to XY path or offset XY path. All that stuff. We see two animations here animating the X and Y, which if you decide to click anything else, may animate it or it may not. And yeah, as you can see, if you click Z rotation, it will make a different option. Center, it will make a path and it won't be connected to the follower1 node or follower1 modifier. So now we go into XY paths, and let's say we want this text to actually do a cool looping animation. So we have these animated, we move it across here, move it down a bit, and then we have this. That's what it looks like. And now what we can do is, let's say, go into here. And this is where you kind of see the splines kind of all weird, the animation, but you can still edit all that and press like Control Shift S, and then it kind of displaces it and all that stuff, and you can make it more smoother. And that does exactly what you think it does. And it just smooths it out a bit. So now we have that effect and all that stuff. So now we get the effect that we want. Maybe not exactly, but now we get the trailing that we want. And similar on how that works, we go into modifiers, and we can go into the follower1 and change the timing again and make it, let's say, less. So when we go in here, it's like only a little bit that it was. So let's say it's 2 now. It's extended a lot more, and now we make it like super delayed. That looks good. That looks really cool. Now we have like this text doing all this crazy long looping and all this stuff, and we got the effect that we want. But now, one thing that you'll notice is that I want to explain this, and this makes it very important, is that we only have position on this parameter, this shading element. So if we enabled a new one, say we enabled it, now it's not going to show up here because, well, one, we don't have it enabled on the main tools side. So let's actually enable 2 on this one. Now we see something that runs into the problem. Only this one shading element is being animated like this. And that's because of one specific thing. When we go into the follower, or specifically this one, and go into shading elements, we don't have the same animation. So let's go back into here, modify it the same way with XY path. Now we have a modification by path 2. Now what we do is go into the spline graph, we have the 2 XY paths here. You have the 2 XY paths, and if we go into remove that, we see it's not animated. Well, what we do here is we just click here on XY path 1, copy, and then we just go paste settings. And now, what is the outline doing? It is animating exactly the way that we want it. But one thing that we can do that's kind of fun is going into the keyframes editor. Now, kind of have that, we have like 2 texts kind of shadowing around each other, which this is a cool effect on its own. Anyway, you kind of have all that stuff that you can kind of mess around with it. And that's the main thing that I wanted to kind of show, is that this you would have to repeat every single time that you want to have a shading element to a specific thing. Also, I would like to mention is that color changing doesn't actually change the color. So if you're in the modifiers and you want, oh, I want this to be orange, and you wonder why it's not actually changing and not actually adopting the color that you want. It's because all this does is read whether the parameter is there, and it can change the position and all that stuff. It's not messing around with the actual properties or anything, at least to my knowledge. I think it's dependent on which parameter you're using, but it's only reading the color changing in this. So if we decide to, let's say, make it like yellow, then it's yellow, and that's what I wanted to basically explain here. And this is where we get into the option of styling effects specifically. You could spend time, and this is something that I did in the Serial Experiments Lain effect, specifically on the main text. This trailing effect I figured out, and I wanted it to be in one text. I wanted to see if I could make the shadings elements as close as possible to the original text from the main effect, from the actual show. And in the end, I did achieve that. And we'll actually go over it when I explain what I did in some of my attempts. But this is something that I wanted to get covered before we kind of get into anything. Same thing with another option, which is the create bump map option. And this is done specifically by doing one thing, which is, let's say we have this text show up. Let's say it has hello 2. So, oh, that didn't work. So now we have hello again. Let's scale that up. Now what we do is place a blur. Let's say we blur it out a bit. So if I enable it, there we go. Have a blur. Let's blur that out slightly, a little bit more. Then we add a create bump map. Create bump map. And now we have this. So let's change it to float 32, height scale as high as possible if you really wanted to, and then filter size or whatever, and all that stuff. Now what we do is get an arrow dilate, and then we just press shift, place it here, or hold shift and place it here, and we have now the arrow dilate. So let's go back to the create bump map viewer and then change this to Gaussian. What that does is just kind of make it a little bit different, and then we can change the amount and all that stuff and do some interesting things with this, and we can make it look like this, or many things that you get to choose. So you can change that, all that stuff, and make it look all interesting. I'm gonna kind of move that a bit here, kind of forward. It's not necessary, but you can. I'm gonna add another blur and blur that. Now the actual thing is blurred, and you can change that blur however much you wish, and it kind of blurs out the create bump map, so it's not as harsh and all that stuff. And you can still go into the arrow dilate and make it as sharp as you want it to, or as weird as you want it to, and all that stuff, and just kind of get a way that you like it. Here. So now we have this final text effect. But one thing that we notice is, one, no alpha, and it's not getting the alpha from the text. So let's actually get into a color corrector. So color corrector here, and then go into here. And all we do, take away the saturation. What that does is just make it black and white. So now we have that. And we finally got what we like. So let's just move this here, at here, move this here, at here. We're just gonna make it a little bit more condensed so we have a little bit more room. But now we have this. Let's now go into something that's specific. Let's mask, and by pressing Alt, you can just effect mask, and what that does is, again, blocks that out. You can also apply by mask. There we go. Okay, so we got that all covered. It's this button here. So process up, multiply by mask, and then you just click that, and there you go. Boom. You get it cut in the way that you want it. So here we have now the full effect, the way that we want it, and all that stuff. So now we have this. Now, one thing that I would personally do is probably mess around with the contrast a bit, make it a little bit more stronger, so it's more pronounced. And now what we do is get into probably actually a merge. Place that here. And now we get a background. So let's get a background, make that a color that we want. Let's choose blue. We have this. So similarly as last time, you go in here, we mask it. So now we have this all masked. And then we can get like one specific effect, and that could be maybe another color corrector or something. That could be and now let's get this, and just let's get two blurs. Get the general idea, and let's put this at. Now we have this. And now you get this kind of weird effect or something. In any case, this kind of makes this faux 3D effect. And I know it's not as accurate to the text that I was trying to replicate, but I don't have the original node graph right here, but I'll go over that later and fully in-depth and explain all this stuff. In any case, just checking the time that I had on this. These two effects are the things that kind of like run this whole project. So you could always mess around with this and try to get it the way that you want it, but overall, this kind of part is the main focus and kind of the thing that really does kind of make everything really pop. And kind of just do everything that you want it to. Okay, change this here. Ooh, look at that effect. That's nice right there. That looks kind of cool. Yeah, you can get some pretty cool looks here. See this one in itself just looks kind of cool. And then you can also have the option to change the text font. Say this or this one. Hello. Like, see, you can get a lot of unique effects just by messing around with this. And that's the thing that's interesting. I've never practiced this before. I've never gotten an effect like this, but now I have, and it looks cool. So again, it just kind of shows that this has a lot of options. Let's see what this looks like. Let's see if this actually works. Yes, it does. It's very slow, but it does work. So again, there is an option to be able to use this type of effect. It's just going to be very laggy. And even if you did do the other one, it would still be just as laggy. It's just that this is running so many things. But still, you can use the follower to affect this. And once it's like cached, you get this kind of smooth looking, interesting effect that you can use repeatedly. And that also goes for the actual shading elements. So if you want to make something extremely crazy, you can. So in any case, this has been 20 minutes of me explaining this darn thing. So let me just actually get into the whole kind of main thing and just show you on how I actually got the effect kind of done in. So yeah, let's have future me explain what I did. Okay, hello, hi. This is the very quick explanation that I explained in the previous shot. So this is my first attempt. That's what I'm going to call this. I'm going to go into the first attempt and then my second attempt. I'm sorry, I'm very hyper. But in any case, let's see how this works. So we get to see a couple things. This was my first attempt, and there's two things that are wrong with it. One is this text effect and this one. Now, as I started, I'm going to explain one thing and make that perfectly clear. I did this before I knew about the whole follower and text bump map and all that stuff. I knew about it, but when I tried to actually attempt it, I ran into the exact problems that I showed you before. I just couldn't figure it out. And let me tell you, I was annoyed for hours. But we see this, and it does the whole thing. It has the background text. Oh, if it will load. It has that kind of just warp stuff. It's going to take a very long time because it's not cached or anything. But it has slight wobble, has the layer 01 episode listing, and it has the background kind of elements of text that warp into the scene and kind of do all the animation. So overall, we kind of see that's how it all is done. But let's first off go on the things that I know I did correctly, and that would be one, creating the background. So that would be here in this kind of setup of nodes, and that's just this simple background. This is done using specifically, and this is more or less intuitive, but it still ends up with the same result. Just it is done by a simple background, another background that's brighter, and another background that's more for vignetting, and a color corrected that kind of makes it all different. But all that this does is basically just is using polygon or ellipses in this case. But I recommend using polygons because it's just simpler, and I'll go over that in my second attempt preview. But simply put, this is just making the background. And talking about backgrounds, let's go over the things that you need to know before you try to attempt this effect. One, the things that are the most important is one, the text effect itself. But the things that are the main thing that's important is creating the background, the scan lines, that's here, and then any sort of film grain effects or anything like that, and the sizing options and all that stuff. But pretty much once you create, and also the glass effect, which is this effect that starts off at the start, which is shown in the original, that has kind of these shading elements that are in the main actual project, and they fade out over time. Once the final animation is done, they will fade away at a certain amount of time. So they'll just fade away and disappear, but that's basically what I did. So you have the main background, the main blue background. You have the glass lines, that's what I'm going to call them, the glass texture that fades out after the main text is shown. You have then the main text, and then you have any sort of elements that basically make the scan lines and film grain and all the other effects that you want to add to it. That's the main building blocks of this type of effect, and that's the main thing. If you get one wrong, it ends up obviously making the final project look a little bit inaccurate. But now, let's go into the upgraded version, and it's this darn thing. So yeah, this is the second attempt that I had. This was actually imported from another project. That's why this doesn't actually work. This is just a PNG that has a 4:3 aspect ratio layer. So that's just a PNG. It doesn't matter because there's better ways to do this. So similar in last time, I wanted to try to recreate the background effect on the second attempt. So what I did was add a base, and all that I did is just change in the options sizing. So you go into this background. I chose 4 corner for this one specifically. Hold on, let me move this forward. Wait a bit. Okay, so kind of move my mic for a bit. Just ignore that. I chose 4 corner just to make it look a little bit more dynamic than just one singular color. And then I went into settings or image and then changed the aspect ratio to 144 0 or 1440 by 1080, which is 4:3 aspect ratio. And you could always change this back to normal, and make it a like 1080p resolution video. But what I did was do light, so that's based off of polygon. This is merge, that's a light. And this is actually just a background. So background node, lighter color, polygon that's specifically shaped in this way using just hand editing it. Same thing again, instead of this was an ellipse and then this was a lighter color than the original light, and then it adds this effect. Then what I did is add a vignette, and this is actually a vignette node, I think. No, it's also a effect that was just added using the same exact things that I did as last time. So an ellipse, but this one's inverted, and it just is a darker color. So it does the same exact thing, and then I got this look. So this is a little bit more cleaner than my first attempt, which was only using ellipses. So the polygon is a good tool. I then got a merge, made a second merge, and then added a blur, and then put the first merge into this blur, blurred it out a bit, and then added this as a screen over, and then messed around with the blend and gain to get the final thing. But then I added it into a color corrector to obviously change the color a bit. It just kind of makes it look more old, and also I just like the way the color looks. So that's more personal preference. Here are the things that I did, but that's what I did with that. Now we're gonna go on to the actual 2 options that I did in this video, which is dependent on which one you want to do. Similarly, as I explained previously in my whole introduction to the follower node and all that stuff, I had 2 options specifically. Let's go into the one that's specifically named for me. But as you can see, what I was talking about styling options was exactly this. When I go into here, modifiers, all the X, Y paths and all that stuff you see here, because I copy and pasted it for each effect. And as you can see, there are 6 parameters used. So that corresponds with the amount of shading elements used. As you can see, I used 6. And again, this is just styling depending on each separate thing. And this is basically just eyeballing it. You're never going to get accurate because it's all styling options, but that's the main thing that's kind of cool with this. So yeah, one thing that I'd like to mention is in the making of this, due to the follower node, and as you can see, you have to hand animate this to get the look that you want. And I did actually look frame by frame in the original effect just to get this as accurate as possible. And if I move this over here, you can see the R is in as close as possible to the original R and all that stuff. So well, actually, if I go into the weird one, which would be more accurate, you see WE in as close to the exact place as possible, all this stuff. So yeah, it like even the E or I here is close and all that stuff. Now, one thing that I note I won't be able to ever show is how they did this doubling. And in my personal opinion, I have no idea how they did this. This is like a trailing blur effect. So that's something that I can't tell. Also, I noticed this kind of hazy glitch that they did that's both with the scan lines and not. That stuff I have no clue on how to do. That's not my time at all. I don't know how to do that. But in any case, we see here that it's pretty much almost near 1-to-1 on how it curves and all that stuff. But again, it's just kind of cool. So it does even the stepping, and then it kind of even jostles back a bit and kind of moves. But yeah, I got this as accurate as possible, and it looks pretty good. I'd say it looks pretty good. So in my second attempt, I won that battle. And somewhere on my computer, there is a video of me realizing my confusion and then finally figuring out a way on how to do this. But in any case, I have these two options and effects. And if I go to here, we have, it can work for like multiple different versions and still looks the same because that's how the follower modifier works. But it's wonderful. The main thing is also I did use a certain blur and effect that would be used in the specific instance to make the color interesting. This has the same color alteration as this one. So they're the same. They're the same color corrector, but it's just a duplicate. Not an instance, but a duplicate. But in the end, that creates this effect. I will mention that the follower modifier will kind of mess with some of the shading options position depending on what you do. So again, just to reiterate again, the follower modifier will kind of make these shading options specifically a little bit less accurate, because in the original text effect, before I had this, actually I can go back to here and show you. This was the original effect. This is what it originally looked like before I did the follower. This is more accurate in my opinion. Maybe a little bit brighter, but yeah, the actual shading here is close and very accurate to the original. But then when I did the follower modifier, it kind of just altered it a bit and made it a little bit weirder. But yeah, that's one thing that I'd like to mention. In any case, after I got this done, I decided to try to practice something specifically, and this is where I learned the create bump map effect. As you can see, this is what it looks like, and this is the layer 1, and you can tell it looks really, really good. Compared to the original, it's almost 1-to-1, except for that the shading, the original lighting, isn't in the accurate place. Now, I've seen a certain pirate on the internet explain this type of effect to me, but he didn't do it in this exact way. But in any case, one thing that I can't tell and can't figure out how to do is change where the lighting angle is. I can't figure that out. But that's more dependent on the color, the create bump map specifically, because that's how it works. It can't do angles really. I don't know how to do that. So remember, this is more like fake 3D than actually being able to do that kind of lighting and shading effect. In any case, the final does look good, and in this case, what I did is use some options to basically make the highlight by just using the held out option and making a duplicate instance of the text, or specifically a separate text that is just added onto the style text of text 1. That's what this does. So it says text 1 period style text, and what that does is just read text 1, and then it can just copy what this says. So if I changed this one, let's say added a W, it would still change the actual effect. So yeah, you can just see that there. In any case, this kind of adds this effect. So the highlight, I did the same exact thing with the shadow. So shadow held out, and then that just kind of adds it here. So that's what I did with that. Added this here, and then the blur kind of makes it look all interesting, and then I did brightness contrast and then a color corrector to finally get all the highlights as correct as possible. So that's how I did that effect, and all I did afterward is duplicate that multiple times dependent on the animation that I was doing. So I have one that says mad if I go to a certain place in time. There we go. So this one, similarly, this is one that I added later on. I animated that mad fading in and out exactly. I also added something that's called a dent map, or just dent node. And there are multiple different versions. You can use sine dent and like dent 2 and all that stuff, different types of dents. And I just kind of changed the strength and all that stuff. And overall, I got the look that I wanted, that I thought was okay. And because it's all node based, you can just like plop these in, do the exact same thing, and just connect it to the right places. And at some point, you get the final effect, which looks like this. And that looks all interesting. This is the point where it kind of looks the best. But yeah, you get that, and I did that with all of the text effects. So this one says make me mad. This is the one that says make me mad. And this one also is, instead of a dent, this is using grid warp, which the original text looks like this, but the grid warp is just based off of hand altering the kind of effect. But yeah, it did pretty good. And I just repeated this with like the one that says make me sad, that's at the start specifically, and that just does the same thing. So grid warp, and then I have that, and that was just warps it away like that. So yeah, that one's different. I added a lot more detail there. That one does the same exact thing. In the end, looks like this. Tons of different things. I had one animating for make me feel. So that one's near the end, and that one just kind of goes over here. Then there's two, there's the all right that kind of just flashes across here. This is also has a dent, and that just kind of makes everything kind of warp and shift and do all this cool stuff. Then there's one that's lane that goes down. So this one just shoots down, and this is in the original. So as you can see, one goes up and then one kind of turns in, and that's the animation with the actual full Serial Experiments Lain thing. And then this one, so in full, it goes like this. So all together, in the end, that looks like this one. And that just does the same exact thing, goes to the side, and then text pops up similar to this one, and then does that. So yeah, this is the lane effect. Then there's the one that adds those all together. The one that has the make me feel goes here too. I added all these together in one long string, and then that in the turn went into this one. So that's what this finally looks like. One thing that I do think is that they hand animated that L to make it go over the L here, but I don't know exactly. All that together, using like different overlay options, screen over, all that stuff. I wasn't able to get that accurate, but I got it. It's over it, and it's actually working, so that's all that mattered. Soon, I added that all based off I added the layer name effect here, and that kind of is affected by all of those. This one is added behind the actual weird text and the layer, so they're actually forward. That's just how nodes work. Kind of cool. But in the end, I have that, and that kind of all together kind of warps into this kind of look. It takes a long time, but yeah, it turned out pretty good. And it did the thing that you needed it to. I then added the same old scan lines effect. If I can pause this. Stop. Okay, there we go. If I can pause this, there we go. We have the scan lines, and this is from the old file. So I just duplicated that and added it over here. Same thing with the glass effect. That's why I'm not going to go necessarily over it, because the glass effect is just really truthfully eyeballing the living crap out of the actual image and just trying to get it as accurate as possible. So my best recommendation is just look at this image and just hope. And that's kind of what I had to do. So yeah, I just tried to get it as accurate as possible. And this is just done by different types of rectangles. This is done by a background that I specifically made to have certain darkness to. So as you can see, two backgrounds. One's based off of a rectangle, and that just adds a highlight. And then another one is slowly faded into this kind of gray to white and then transparent middle. But yeah, I just kind of shaped those depending on where they were. Some were laid backwards, some were laid forwards, some were laid over across here, some were down, etc., etc. And they just kind of ended up slowly making the full effect, which ended up being this. And they were kind of just overlaid. So the best example I can give is that this is overlay, this is hard light, this one was overlay. So it kind of mixes between hard light, overlay, and all that stuff. But yeah, that's what I did with that one. That was kind of how I did it. And then I added that into the background added into that, and then I put that into a glass animated thing. So this is just a merge that changes the like alpha gain, and that just animates here and it fades. So it just fades the blend and it just fades it away. So that's all it does. That's all it does. So in any case, soon, I didn't add a grain, anything like that. But after the scan lines, I was pretty much done with the final version, and then I exported it, and then I was done. So that's how I did the effect. And in any case, I hope that future me will cover the kind of ending stages. Either that, or this is the end of the video. And I hope that you enjoyed learning a little bit more about both the follower and the cool effect using the create bump map. So in any case, also, you can use this to do so much more. And if you get into 3D planes and all that stuff, you'd probably be able to make like the Copeland OS login screen and stuff and do all that. And that, to me, I haven't practiced with it. I have not even dared to try it yet, but I'm intrigued on how to do some of the camera effects. And that's something that I'm going to be looking into in the future, trying to make fake OS screens as like border effects that you can add onto videos or something. I'm just, for me personally though. So if you want to have those public, do it yourself. I'm sorry, that's kind of mean, but still, I'm going to show you the details on how to do it, but I may not be able to send them to you. But just in any case, I hope that you have a good day. And this is kind of the ending of the video. So yeah, goodbye.